Hi, I'm Tia,
And I'm Toni.
and this is Emotions Unscripted. How has your week been?
Week has been pretty good. I've been trying to be more intentional, listening to my body, trying to partake in more naps and relaxing. How was your week?
I probably should need some more naps. I've been waking up like at 3 o'clock, between like 3 and 5 o'clock every morning, just hot, and then I can't go back to sleep. So it's just been like a stressful kind of. I need sleep, but I still have to work, and I can't go to sleep. And so I've just been going back and forth with that. So I understand that need for some naps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So but I guess one of the things I was thinking about this week, and it has come up in like talking to people and things like that. And one of the things that I realized about myself is I have this level of thinking about things that I don't understand why other people don't have this level of thinking about things. And I was talking to people in the past like couple of weeks, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can just, feel something and be like, yeah, that is what it is, and then move on to something else. And I'm perfectly okay with that. And they're like, how do you do that? I was like, I don't know. It's just something I do. And so I had to start thinking about it. And I was like, I can't just keep telling people to like make this switch. I'm like, no, just don't think about that emotion anymore. I was like, how did I get to that point? And so it made me start thinking about like a couple of years ago, it was about 2, 3 years ago, I was like really doing some intentional kind of, self reflection. And I was just kind of going through my life. And I was like reading more into like spirituality type stuff, reading up on astrology. I was just doing a lot of that stuff. And I realized, I guess it kind of clicked on me that, you create your own reality. And so I was sitting there and I was thinking, I was like, wait, I created this mess, like all this crap that I'm going through, all the struggles that I'm having, it's my fault. And so then I was sad, and I was sad for like 3, 4, 5 weeks. It was somewhere between like 3 and 5 weeks. And I'm like, i'm just i'm I'm down. I'm not eating. I'm sleeping all the time. And I was just really in this funk of like, look what you did to yourself. This is all your fault. And then it was just like one day, I was like, wait a minute. If I created that negative, that means that I can create the positive. And once I had that realization, um, everything just kind of shifted from there. And so whenever anything negative came, I was like, okay, now I'm going to create something positive. I'm going to change it. And so I know what the universe is throwing at me, or I know some of the things I'm still trying to clear out in terms of negative things in my life, and I can change those things. And that's kind of how I started operating, and I've been doing it for the past couple of years. And so when people say, oh, all this sucks, and I was like, you can change it, and they're like, no, you can't. I was like, yeah, you can. But it makes me think about like how I don't sit with those emotions anymore. I just kind of be like, okay, it is what it is. I'll be better tomorrow. Everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah, for sure. And you bring up like a really good point. Like first emotions are temporary. I feel like I feel like emotions last a little bit longer depending on the meaning that we attach to them or how long we hold on to them. But if we just kind of like let them float by like clouds, then they'll just go away. And the power of thought and perspective is so important. I'll hear people say, "Oh, I don't believe in the law of attraction," or "I don't believe in thoughts become things." But it's like you literally speak everything into existence, whether you're aware of it or not. And just like being aware and really learning that skill of like learning to observe without judgment. I think some of that comes easier to some than others.
Yeah. I call it, I always refer to it as like feeding or starving the emotion. And so what happens is like when people are, they have the emotion. And for me, my emotion is usually like anxiety. And so the anxiety comes on. I feel like the racing heart, I can start feeling myself working myself up. And I can feed it and be like, what's going on? Oh my gosh, I'm going to die. Something bad is about to happen. And then it just gets worse and worse and worse, and it intensifies because I'm feeding it. I'm giving it all this additional ammo. But then when I starve it, when I'm like, I'm feeling a little anxious here. And then I'm like, but nothing's going on. And so it must just be like a little fluke, and that's okay. And I just keep on going. And so then it dies down because I didn't feed it.
Mhm.
It makes me think about like animals. Like if you feed the stray dog or the stray cat, guess what? It's going to keep on coming around. And so all those thoughts that you put into it is feeding it, and we need to starve it.
For sure. It almost makes me think about like your mind as a garden. And if you visualize your mind as a garden, it's like, what are you planting in your garden? Are you planting tomatoes? Are you planting healthy thoughts? Are you planting, things that are unhealthy for you? So we literally create our own reality with what we plant, what we invest with our thoughts. So we're much more powerful than we know. Like I know a couple years back when I was like on my journey of like figuring out the soul and what's our life force and just meditating and connecting with my guides. One thing that was really helpful, my guides was like, imagine that you're in a theater and you're overlooking and you're watching a play. That's you, you're a character. So your emotions are of your physical body, they're not of like your spiritual essence or spiritual energy. So if you're able to look at it like that, like anxiety is attached to your physical body, not your true self. So recognizing the difference between your true self and your physical self, it kind of helps me when I'm feeling like really intense feelings like sadness or grief and things like that.
It makes me think about, I don't know if your school, when you were going through school, did this, but I remember our school used to talk about how we said a person's like diagnosis. And so it isn't like Jenny, Jenny has depression or Jenny is depressed. No, that's not how it goes. Hold on, let me correct it. So it would be like, I think the autism one usually always sticks better with me. And it'd be like, oh, that person is autistic. And it's like, no, Jenny has autism. And so we don't want to label them as autistic. We want to say that they have this. And so it's like a piece of them, it's not them. And so if we say, you know, um, they're autistic versus they have autism, it separates like it from being like part of their core versus a trait of them. And so that's what it made me think about, how we tend to see our anxiety as our whole or our depression as our whole versus just like outside things. So I like that whole, it's the physical thing.
For sure, because most people I talk to, they feel that they are sadness. Like, I am sad. And it's like, you have to be careful with your words because if this is your whole person and this is the emotion, you can just let it flow by. But a lot of people will let it like enmesh with their whole being. And then they are sad and they hold onto the sadness, and the sadness is trying to leave, and you're like, no, stay, stay, stay. And I think that's how people suppress a lot of emotions, how they hold on to things. I think that's how grudges are created, honestly. People just
Mhm.
hold on and they take ownership of those emotions that they should just physically just let pass and let go.
And I don't, if you think about it, I think people, they look at the emotions as negative and they never look at the positive emotions. And it's like, you can be happy and excited, but are you happy all the time? Are you excited all the time? No, they come and go. But people are like, oh no, the sadness is there all the time. And it's like, well, if the sadness is there all the time, then that means the happiness can be there all the time. And it's like, no. And it's like, no, it works the same way. And so you're not going to be happy all the time. You're not going to be excited all the time. And so being able to recognize, as you were saying, that they come and go.
Yeah, for sure. Because your emotions are definitely temporary and it's a choice. You have a choice to look at a situation, the glass half full, glass half empty. Like life is gonna life. Things are gonna happen. Some things suck, right? But I feel like if you're feeling like the emotions are too heavy, then it's like, what are the things that you can learn from the situation? How can you move forward and be proactive in the future? Opposed to just focusing on the sadness, it's like, what can you do with that information? Because
Mhm.
I love looking at emotions as information, good or bad, whatever you want to look at it as information. And it's like, how do you move forward with this information or this data that you just got?
Mhm. And it kind of, I'm kind of like going back into like the whole little garden example. And I don't know if you remember a couple of weeks ago, I was showing you my plant. I was like, what's wrong with this plant? And so it's like when you start learning how to take care of the garden, you don't have all the tools and you don't know. And like sometimes you have to reach out to somebody else and be like, what's wrong with this plant? And so I take the plant and I look at it. The roots were rotten on it. That's what was wrong with the plant. And I changed the soil, but then I was like, wait a minute, it's still not doing anything different. And then I had to go do some more research. I was like, what's going on? What do I need to do? And so I'm sitting here watching videos and it's like, oh, I have to get rid of the rotten roots. And I need to make sure that there's like spray it with some peroxide and make sure that it cleans out all the bacteria before you replant it. And so I planted it in water versus planting it in back into the soil. And I was like, I won't put it back into that same soil. I'm going to get some new soil for it. But it's like I had to learn how to tend to my garden in order to make sure that my plants survived.
For sure. And I love how it's like trial and error. Like, is it the roots? Is it the soil? Like, what is going on? And that's kind of how we are as humans. Like, it's multifaceted. Like, there's so many different layers, and we're not only dealing with our present self, we're dealing with our inner child. We're dealing with our 4-year-old self, our 8-year-old self. So in this moment, if we're triggered by something, it may not even have to do with today. So
Hmm.
like today, you may not be upset because you didn't get the raise. You may be upset because you feel like you're not enough.
Hmm.
So it's so important for people to like really check in and see like, why is this emotion really coming up?
Hmm. It's like, why are you upset? And that's why one of the things that I have people do in terms of like journaling, I always say we want to journal with intention. We don't want to just write down what happened every single day. We want to be able to look at, you know what, I'm feeling something funny right now. I'm feeling some type of emotion. And so I'm like, okay, write down what you think that emotion is. Write down what's going on. Write down what thoughts are coming up in your head. Are you feeling like you're worthless? Are you feeling like you're not good enough? What are those things? And then it's like, where has this shown up in other areas of your life? Is that this just today that you're feeling this way? Or do you remember the same feeling when you was 10 years old and you didn't make the soccer team that you were trying to get onto? And so being able to really dissect and understand like the layers of those emotions.
Exactly. And I think before you do any of that, you have to identify what emotion you're feeling. And I think most people know happy, sad, angry. So it's so important to like, increase your vocabulary when it comes to emotions. Google that feelings wheel. And if you don't know what emotion it's describing, look it up because that is good information. If you go around your whole life saying you're angry, but really you just feel, you know, like you're not supported or you feel frustrated, if you're applying the wrong emotion to the situation, you're just going to be going in circles and you're never going to be able to work through that situation.
Yeah. And I think we see that a lot with people, and it's just like, I'm angry, so I'm going to punch this wall. You're not angry, you're embarrassed. And maybe you should go and have a conversation with somebody versus punching that wall because you're not angry.
Exactly. And I think, when it comes to emotions as well, I think that we should all take more accountability for our emotions because your emotions and your feelings are always valid, but your action and behaviors are not. And
Hmm.
I think that's where people get confused or they, feel empowered, but then they take away their power by, doing some type of action or behavior like hitting someone or, damaging property. And I feel like where the accountability comes in is, really checking in with yourself. Like, are
Hmm.
you drinking enough water? Are you having enough snacks? Are you going to the doctor and getting checkups? Are you just really in tune with yourself? And I think most people aren't in tune with their physical body. So then how can you be in tune with your emotions?
Hmm. And it makes me think about how people externalize their emotions versus internalize their emotions. Like, you made me mad, you made me sad, you did this. And so, what it does is it gives the other person the power to have to change it. So now that person has to change something in order for you to feel different. And it's like, no, you chose to be angry, you chose to be mad. I always use the example of like, um, I went to a high school that was pretty populated. It was one of the mega high schools, the original mega high schools. And if you're walking down the hall and you bump into somebody, you can have that initial reaction of, oh, this school is so crowded. They need to do something about this. But you go about your day. You don't say, oh, this person, like, ran into me or I'm mad about this, you recognize that, this is just the environment that I'm in and it's okay. And I don't have to take on that emotion. But then you could, on the other end, you can bump into somebody and be like, they're always disrespecting me. People don't respect my space. All these people are out to get me. And so now you have chosen to be angry about the situation versus being able to recognize that it's just a part of the environment. And so you have a choice of whether or not you get angry. I always use the example too of like if somebody punches you in the face, what are you going to do? You have the choice. If you're going to be mad about it, if you're going to be sad about it, if you're just going to sit there in shock, those are your choices. They don't determine that for you.
Exactly. And you really highlight a good point, and it's understanding. Like with a mother dealing with a child and a 2-year old's upset and they throw a toy in your face, you understand that it's nap time for that child. And of course, you may be caught off guard and you just got hit in the face with a toy, but you understand. So you can't go off and hit that child or, provide consequences. So it's like, I'm the adult, I understand. So I think coming from a place of understanding, even though, yeah, getting hit in the face by the toy, it hurt. Okay. But the understanding allows you to kind of navigate with that information and move forward in like a more consistent way.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think that's also part of that emotions is being able to clarify with others what their emotion is too. And I think that if we look at like how our emotions play off of each other, and it's like if somebody is coming to you and they appear mad, you may respond to them like you were in an angry fashion. But if you were able to sit and say, hold on, what's all this? What's going on here? And they can be like, I'm just so frustrated because people are X, Y, and Z. And it's like, oh, okay. So now I'm going to respond to you differently because at first I felt anger and I was ready to put my defenses up. But if you sit back and you clarify, then you can kind of control how you interact with that person and then smooth over the interaction versus exploding something up into something bigger than what it is.
Yeah, that makes me think about two things. One, it makes me think about we're all made up of energy. And just walking along in the grocery store and someone has a really bad attitude, that energy can affect us. You just walked in the grocery store, you were perfectly fine, and then you leave and you're just like you feel terrible. So that's another thing. You can transfer energy, so you make sure that you have to like protect your peace in a sense. And another thing is like allowing someone to ruin your day. I know in the past when I was younger and I was very emotional, I would say, "Oh my gosh, like such and such ruined my day." And I had someone tell me, you allowed them to ruin your day. And it took a while for it to click.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I'm older and I'm wiser and I have more understanding, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like no one can ruin my day unless I allow them to.
Mm-hmm.
Unless I give them that power."
Yeah, it's like that saying people will be like, "Oh, they stole my joy away." I'm like, "No, you gave it away. You made that conscious decision to say, here's my joy, take it," and they took it.
For sure. And I think it's so important to do some type of maintenance, like to make sure that you're good as far as like getting enough sleep, eating enough food, drinking enough water, exercising, because that's going to help your physical body. If your
Mhm.
physical body is like all out of whack, how do you think it's going to affect you when you have these emotions come in? How are
Mhm.
you going to be able to navigate that energy if you're feeling sluggish, if you're hungry, if you're cranky, if you've just eaten chips all day? It's kind of like a computer system. Your system's not going to work properly. You're not going to be this calm Zen Buddha person if your system is all out of whack. So everything is connected and everything runs smoothly if you're able to maintain and get ahead of things.
It makes me think about like the transfer of energy that you were talking about too. And it's like if you're not in that right state of mind, right health to be able to recognize that that wasn't your energy. Now what you do is like, I'm in a bad mood now. And now it's like, I'm going to start feeding this bad mood. And now I'm going to go about being mad for the rest of the day, not recognizing that that wasn't my anger to hold on to. That wasn't my ick to kind of hold on to. And so being able to recognize, hold on. I had a shift after. I'm sitting here thinking about HEB. I had a shift after going into HEB. And so now I need to be able to recenter myself or ground myself because something threw me off. And I don't know what it was, but I know that I'm not experiencing that emotion right now. That's not mine. I'm going to get rid of it.
So don't take ownership for what isn't yours. Another thing I think is helpful, like if you're dealing with another person and they're coming at you with their energy, is like for you on the other side, like get curious. Like imagine yourself as like Inspector Gadget and, hey, what's going on? Like ask the questions, allow them to speak about why they're coming at you like this. Because if you match their energy, it's only going to create an explosion at that point.
Mhm. And it reminds me of like when I used to work like in outpatient hospitalization programs and rehabs and things like that. We used to always do I always called it smackdown training, but it's how we, learn how to deal with people who are aggressive. And one of the things that we talked about is not the non-physical stuff. And if somebody's coming at you and they're yelling, to be able to talk in a low, calm voice,
Mhm.
and how the person will eventually start matching you if you're talking in that low, calm voice. But if you're yelling at them and they're yelling at you, it just escalates and escalates the whole situation. So being able to, you know, I'm not mad right now. They are. And I'm not going to become mad because they are. I'm going to kind of keep myself grounded and I'm going to bring them down to me.
For sure. And I think that all comes with experience, it comes with knowledge, it comes with understanding, and, trial and error, learning from your mistakes. If you just go your whole life just being triggered and matching people's energy, it's like, when are you going to get tired of doing that?
Hmm. Yeah. I think for me, I had to really learn about protecting my energy. And that was one of the things that I focused on a lot is because I know I have control over these emotions, then I'm not going to allow other people to interfere with that. And I'm not going to say things over and over again to people. I'm not going to engage in these back and forths. That's not going to solve anything. I'm going to recognize that you're being stupid and I'm going to let you be stupid over there because I don't have the time or the energy to put into that when I know that you're still going to be stupid afterwards.
Yeah, and it's so important to understand like you literally only have control over yourself. You don't have control over other people's feelings, emotions, persuading them. You can tell them how you feel, but trying to control other people's emotions, it's like it's pointless. It's like you have enough, you know, to deal with controlling or managing your emotions. Like how are people going to control other people?
Mhm. And I'll admit that I do it with my one of my sons all the time, and he'll be upset, and I was like, "You have no reason to be upset right now." And he's like, "How are you going to determine if I'm I'm going to be upset right now?" But I was like, to me, logically, it doesn't make sense that you're upset, so I'm going to tell you that you have no reason to be upset. But in reality, I know that he gets to determine if he's upset or not. Now, am I going to try to make him be logical and think about, I have no reason to be upset? Yes, I am. But I can't determine that for him.
And it makes me think about like just with being a therapist and taking all of these courses and classes and webinars and how the brain plays a big part in our emotions and how it's controlled. And I don't know if a lot of adults are aware of this, but like your brain's not fully formed until the age of 25. Now they're saying 25 to 35.
Hmm.
So if you're dealing with younger people, young adults and children, and they're not able to manage their emotions, it's like hopefully we have the understanding that if they like flip their lid, that they're trying to regulate, giving them time and space to kind of regulate their emotions. And I think a lot of adults, they can use that for themselves.
Hmm.
Give yourself time to, maybe go get a nice iced coffee and relax and kind of process or just be with your thoughts before you make a decision, before you have that hard conversation. Even sleep on it. There's nothing wrong with sleeping on, very passionate emotions because it is some information that you're getting, and you don't want to just jump off the ledge and just make a decision.
Hmm. And I think that it is important to differentiate between regulating your emotions and suppressing your emotions. And so a lot of times when people take those breaks, they're just sitting there and pushing it down. I'm just going to keep on pushing it down until it just goes away. And it's like, no, we want to regulate. We want to understand. We want to be able to, bring ourselves down, not push the emotion down that we're not dealing with it. And that comes back to that intentional kind of journaling, or being very kind of processing the emotion and like really understanding it, so you aren't having to constantly deal with it in the same manner, or it's not constantly coming up in the same manner. So when you know how to regulate it, it becomes, I can be angry, or I can express to you that I'm angry without it just taking over my whole day or ruining my mood for the day. I'm able to express these things, and not just push it down and then I blow up at you.
Exactly. It makes me think about, you know, how our breath is connected to our emotions, how our breath is connected to how we regulate, how smooth and comfortable we feel in our bodies. And I think a lot of times, people can like breathe and get a lot of the emotions out to the point where they can actually process or actually think about the information. But with that shallow breathing, the emotions are going crazy. You have the physical sensations going crazy. Your neck is stiff, your chest is tight. It's like just breathe and see what kind of happens, and as you calm down.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think about with that is that you really have to practice that breathing and get into that space of it becoming more natural, especially people with like anxiety or high levels of stress. We tend to naturally have shorter breaths. And so when people tell me to deep breathe, I'm like, breathe. I feel like I'm choking because my body's not used to breathing that way. It's used to having those real short, kind of shallow breaths. And it's like, deep breathing is so uncomfortable until you get used to doing it.
For sure. I think one of the tricks where I'll kind of like consult with my clients is I'll encourage them to practice a couple of deep breaths when they're regulated throughout the day. So then when they're not regulated or dysregulated, their body, it's like a muscle memory, like, oh, we're doing the deep breaths again. So if you get that practice in throughout the day and then something happens and you feel dysregulated, your body can kind of take over and know like, okay, this is what we're doing, like an automatic response.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's part of like, back to the SmackDown training. That was one of the things that you always had to you had to recertify every year. And the goal is that you do it so often that it becomes natural whenever you're in that situation. And so if somebody's trying to attack you or somebody's yelling at you, you naturally react in those ways.
Mhm.
So, like you're saying, with like practicing those breathings, even when you're not anxious or depressed or whatever it is, it becomes one of those natural things that you do. Your body's like, oh, this is when we're supposed to do these things.
Exactly, exactly. And just always just observing and being aware. Like we have this physical body, but like what is driving our body? What is our life source? And it is our soul, which is not attached to our emotions. So just being aware and just sometimes just trying to look at yourself as you're an actress or an actor and you're just playing a role and you're experiencing this emotion in this role, but you are not that emotion is.
Yeah, I love that.